Maximum Health with your host, Dr. Ken Gray. With over 20 years in healthcare, Dr. Gray is a doctor of Oriental medicine and holistic physician fusing Eastern and Western healing. Dr. Gray is on staff at Jupiter Medical Center and in private practice with an office in Jupiter, Florida, where he resides. Dr. Gray enjoys being a physician as well as being an educator. His unique approach to holistic healing has taken him abroad to lecture in Baden-Baden, Germany, and treat sports professionals in Hawaii and Biarritz, France. He is co-author of several books on food therapy and the founder of the annual Star Summit Talks at the Norton Museum of Art in Palm Beach, Florida. Now it's time for Maximum Health with Dr. Ken Gray.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Maximum Health Radio, quality living with yours truly, Dr. Ken Gray. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to be on the air and getting to share such amazing lives with you all. And today we have Mr. Solihin Thom. And he's so gracious with his time. We're on different time zones, I believe, 6 or 7 hours apart. And he's from Inner Dialogue and the science and art of ontological kinesiology. Mr. Thom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Where are you exactly?
We're in Turkey.
All right.
Down on the Mediterranean coast, one of the more beautiful parts of the world.
Beautiful. And you've been traveling a lot lately, haven't you?
I have, yes. I'm ostensibly retired, but actually I'm still working, teaching. So I've been here and there, particularly in America and also Austria.
Okay.
So it's been a busy year.
And you, I missed you when you were here in the U.S., and we were connected by one of your lovely students / representatives here in the U.S.
Yes, Pamela Shaw. Yes, she had said that she got hold of you, but unfortunately, yes, we didn't meet. It would have been nice, but never mind, we can do it on the phone.
Yes. And tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and teaching and how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. It's always a little difficult to sort of span 40-odd years of work. I'm an osteopath, trained in England and acupuncturist, but trained in Sri Lanka rather than England or America. And I started in 1980 and started to recognize, after a short while of being quite successful as an osteopath, that I wasn't really getting down to sort of the root of the problem. So all these patients who were coming in to see me, there were people who I couldn't really sort out, and I started to notice that there were certain attributes or qualities or virtues that they were missing. And so I started looking at a more esoteric way of observation rather than a physical observation, and started to see that they were missing qualities that actually prevented them from being integral or flexible or reflective. And this was the beginning of the work all those years ago. And I suppose I sort of grew into it. I was taught by a very good chiropractor from Oregon, a man who was called Alan Beardall. And he taught me clinical kinesiology, which was, for us in England, little old England, was terribly exciting because it suddenly allowed us to pinpoint the problems behind people's illnesses and distortions and dysfunction. And so I used his method, which used muscle testing, kinesiology, and mudras. And mudras are a proto-language or a gesture language that allow us to ask the body whether certain peculiarities are disorganized or dysfunctional or whatever. So these mudras basically pinpointed the structure of the body. And so this, as an osteopath, this was terribly exciting. But over, I suppose, 2-3 years, I started to realize that it, too, was rather limiting. And then, unfortunately, Alan Beardall died in a tragic car accident in Wales. And I had this extraordinary sort of sense that I should write to him. And the man was dead. And yet I wrote and said, if you need me, I'm here. And about 2 weeks later, I had this with a friend of mine, an experience where Alan literally turned up in my practice in London. And I'm not going to go into the details of it, but basically we got the message that he was sort of unable to go, unable to leave this plane. I'm making it up a bit because I don't really know exactly what was happening. But in that process, I started to receive, with my colleague actually, hand modes or mudras that sort of catapulted me into my own work. And so this ontological process started to manifest in about 85, something like that. So since 85, I've been developing this work. As I've just said, it's called Ontological Kinesiology as a subtext, but really the full work is called Inner Dialogue. And Inner Dialogue is one shortened, or two words shortened into one. And it's the idea that our soul or essence talks to us if we can hear it. And when it talks to us, it can guide and take us through our lives in a congruent way. And when we don't hear it, then our bodies disorganize, dysfunction, and fall apart, etc., etc. And in a way, our illnesses and dysfunctions are a way for us to say, look, there's something going on and you're not listening. So inner dialogue is a process whereby we use kinesiology. And kinesiology is a very bad press in many parts of the world because it can be very inaccurate, it can be misleading, and in a way you can get sort of answers from the physical body that you want. And this is the problem with kinesiology because most people don't really understand the sort of dynamics of the forces that we as human beings are involved in. So when we're muscle testing, our own thoughts can invade, if you like, the integrity of the body that you're working with, and can make reflexes act out, and so that the muscles become weak or strong depending on what you're doing, and it gives you sort of false yeses and false nos. And so we teach, and I've taught, a very precise modeling of kinesiology to make it as accurate as possible, but also to really model the clients, I'm sorry to say that, by my students, to model my students so that actually they are in an integral place where they're not involved with the outcome of working with a client. And so that their, I'm not going to say passivity, but actually their presence and their ability to be still and quiet as they work with the clients, that actually they don't invade or don't alter the work that they're actually manifesting. And so what happens is that the kinesiology is just the toolbox, but the real key is the mudras. And the mudras themselves, or gesture language, are an extraordinary language that allows us to ask the body really what's going on. And so I've received, into my hands from a quiet and surrendered place, about 1,600 mudras. And so this lexicon allows us metaphorically to pull up a narrative out of the body, and it is the narrative that we work with. So the narrative is like a book. And a book, as you know, if you read a book and you go, gosh, that was a great book, or oh, that was a terrible book, or oh, goodness me, that sentence was really quite hard or quite vicious or very poetic. And so these words and our language has a force. Now, if you can imagine a story sitting in a human being, that story itself has a force, and it's the force that then alters the structural body, our emotional body, our behavioral body, and our mental body, and notwithstanding our spiritual essence or state. So that's what I've been developing, and really it's taken me these many years to put it together. I've taught it in bits and pieces over the years as osteopathy, or as cranial osteopathy, or as acupuncture, or as homeopathy, or as genetic epigenesis. But now I'm actually teaching the whole of the work, so about 4,500 pages of work in 20 days. In a way, it's to simplify and make this work acceptable and easy to understand for the ordinary person. And that's what we're beginning to do. So it's actually rather exciting.
Thank you for that summarization, which is really intense and complex all at the same time, but you you did your best to simplify it, and I'm going to try to do a little bit more for our listeners.
Good.
So, osteopathy, let's go back to that. Was that your first entrance into medicine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So an osteopath, or a doctor of osteopathy or DO versus an MD has become known to be a little bit more towards the mind-body or holistic approaches, and we see that line blurring as to the respect that used to be sort of focused on the MD versus DO. Now the DO you see excelling and transitioning into more places of authority and developments in science and all sorts of things, because there's a scientific and hand to osteopathy as well as the overall sort of natural medicine world, which can sometimes detract from the idea that there is science involved. Then you look at other areas that you delved into, which is the Eastern medicine, which started, I guess, next with acupuncture. And that deals with the energetic pathways of the body and chi and balance and blockages and restoring that. And then you went deeper and you said, okay, well, how do we interact? Furthermore, you went into the Ayurvedic and other, areas of the East, which is more Indian, with the mudras, which are can be body movements similar to yoga, but very much focused on the hand gestures. Mudra, M-U-D-R-A-S, just for mudras, just if anyone out there wants to research that. And so then you not only looked at the connectivity between all of this and the energetics, but then you funneled it into one nice point of information-based treatments. Correct?
Yes.
Did I do it okay?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Well put together.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, information, let's talk about that, because, there's very much a scientific, and we haven't really put all the pieces together, and we meaning humanity. Science is very much sort of trying to catch up, in my opinion, with the consciousness, the general overall conscious explosion of the human race. And it's kind of lagging behind as much as it's splitting, it's done the quarks and it's done the this and that. The reality is that what's there is there, right? So they're trying to figure out, but we're moving so fast as an entity. And, when you look at energy medicine and all of this, every cell in your body is basically when it comes to DNA, RNA, they're basically light and information depositories. Correct? I mean, can we say that?
Completely correct.
Yeah. So that, in essence, we are light beings, first and foremost.
We are.
And then what we see is very much down the totem pole. we put a lot of worth into it. We put a lot of value into it. We put a lot of research into it in the last, 200 years or so far, as much as the West has decided to, spearhead the whole scientific, revolution. But for many, many hundreds of thousands of years, the energetic components were primary to the state of, how we interacted with life on this planet. So now, let's get to the story part. So if we're energetic beings, we're light beings, and there's a story in each of us with all this information, I understand how you are now focusing on a way for us to heal based on from the story on upwards. Looking at the story and the information as the foundation. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
it's intentional, it's informative, it's all these things, it's affirmations, and then there's a physical connection to all of this. So now we've got this picture, and I'm very interested to hear on some cases that you've worked on with these therapies yourself, and then how people are then, of course, becoming students and working in, so.
Sure.
Thank you for that opportunity to share from that point of view.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I'll just go back to the word that you used, down the totem, I think is what you said.
Down the totem pole.
Yeah. It's very interesting because my work has been, in a way, not taken out of, but understood from classical Aristotle sort of paradigms of the idea that we coexist with different realms or different domains within us. So as humans, we are a body, a physical body, a material body, and full of light, as you've just said. But actually, inside us, we have different realms of being, and so our work is really, in a way, enabling people to grow and develop as a human soul. And so by this process, you have to understand that, first of all, we're living in a sort of rather physical, dense, solid piece of machinery that has these different domains inside us. So we have a material domain, which is the sort of prana, the basic life force that holds up our physical body or the material world. We have the energetic component, the thing that animates us, which is our chi, and it animates our feelings and emotions and physiology and our immune system, etc. And then we have the animal aspect of us, or instinctual part of us, that allows us to move and to manipulate and to go places and to be alpha male and females and to be sexual and gender orientated, etc. And so that's our power and drive. And then, of course, we have, sitting on top of that, a human who then has the choice to be run by these lower elements or something higher. And so what we're doing with our clients and patients and people who we're working with is to allow them to see that there's actually higher dimensions that they can tune into. And when they do so, then light or grace or the spirit or whatever one wants to call it can manifest and, if you like, descend into them and give them new information about who they are and what they are. So our work is really about surrender to a greater reality or an implicate reality, which is light and knowledge and understanding. And that what we're trying to do to people is to help them to grow from their material sort of selves, material soul, to a vegetative or a feeling or an aware soul, to an instinctual or driven or dynamic or powerful soul, and then to a human one. And then there's other levels above that, which we don't really need to go into, but, we're talking about a noble soul and then a saintly and prophetic soul, which is not really my domain at all. But when we start to develop as human beings, rather than a human who's operating from their instinct or a human who's operating from their feelings or from their history, then actually we're in a much more privileged position to begin to heal and to resolve the problems that we carry from our ancestry or from ourselves and our lives here in this world.
How is this story restructured or retold, or how do we draw a new narrative through these treatments or these interactions?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. The first thing is that a story can be from the past. In other words, this is what's been going on, this is what you need to do to resolve it, to let it go, to surrender it, to change the map, to see it from a different position, to reframe it. So that's one of the ways we do it. So reframing, i.e. looking back at the past, seeing it from a particular point of view, and taking a new position and seeing the story, how it could have evolved, how one might have misunderstood it, how one might have taken a particular line, but actually it was wrong. So in other words, reframing can actually totally change the picture for a human being. Now that's one type of story. Another type of story is sort of saying, well, look, here you are, you're stuck. You're in this morass, you're in this state. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to help you to go forward out of this state. Metaphorically, it's sort of time travel. I know it sounds a bit sort of weird, but it's the idea that you can take a human body and say, right, you're actually in 10 days ahead of yourself right this moment. And we basically engage the body so it's enabled to go 10 days, 2 weeks, beyond the now. That's a strange concept. But it is the idea that actually when you disassociate yourself from the force of the narrative, suddenly you're free of it. And when you're free of this force, then you're free to act in a completely different way. So that's another way of looking at it. There's another way as well. When someone is, so in the narrative says X, Y, and Z is happening, this is your state, this is your situation, but actually there's nothing you can do about it. What you have to do is to metaphorically surrender it, metaphorically bow down and let it go, metaphorically ask for help, to pray. So we are using spiritual dictates, spiritual models, because this work has a spiritual legacy. It's been going on for thousands of years, this ontological approach of being, and so that really facilitates people to move forwards because something extraordinary, spirit, enters their field and changes something inexorably, and changes their state, changes their mind, changes their feelings, changes who they are. Now, does this happen every time? No. But does it happen?
Yes. Absolutely. And, it's even in my short life, I'll be 50 this year and next month, actually. And I've been practicing the type of medicine. I've been in healthcare for about 30, but I've been practicing this type of medicine of Eastern, influence for about 20. And, for a lot of it, you can see this physical interaction between the needles, the food, the homeopathy, all of these sort of direct invasive interactions. But there are moments when the breakthrough comes with the re-education, the moments of magic where you connect with someone and you speak to them on a higher level because or something in you speaks to them and speaks to the something in them. And that is the key that unlocks the last phase of healing so that their bodies can receive the healing. Because there's blockages that sometimes are deeper. And I say this when I look at patients that have gone through strokes due to severe grief or loss or other diseases that are really, really have altered their physical and mental bodies to very deep levels. And sometimes the typical medicine or practices work, but sometimes you have that time where, yes, phrases, whether Eastern, biblical, spiritual, whatever you want to call them, come into play. And, I remember having one recently with a patient saying, when I am weak, he is strong. And I spoke of stories where I just had to step aside to let the healing and the actual thing that was supposed to happen because I was standing in the way of my own success and my own evolution. And we as humans do that so much because for the most part, we are action-based. Right? We think something, we do something, and there is a cause and effect. But we cannot see all the other cause and effects going on, and sometimes we have to step aside and let the rhythm and vibration of things culminate into what is most for the highest best of everyone, and not be so self-centered. So what you're saying with these, changing of the narrative, changing of the story, and surrendering. It's not just not doing nothing, because surrendering is doing something.
You're quite
it very much is an active choice, right? It takes a lot of energy to surrender.
Yes. Well, we sort of created a sort of a contextual model, actually, using this ontological approach. So thinking that we have these sort of 5 levels of being or consciousness. So we sort of say at the top end is submission. Well, submission is a pretty big idea, the idea that one completely lets go and metaphorically falls on your face and arms stretched out like the papists in front of the Pope. Submission is a pretty big thing. But then you've got surrender, which we've just been talking about, the idea of letting go, the idea of dropping your head, being humble, being open. Actually, it's a state of mindfulness. not being full of mind, but being empty of mind, just open, like a sort of parachute, basically.
Receiver
But
rather
then,
than receiver more than a transmitter.
We've got it, absolutely, a receiver. And then, of course, you've got the idea of the animal body of yourself, which is the action-driven part of us. And so that's pause. So we say, look, you pull the reins back. Go back onto your heels, metaphorically. Because if you go back on your heels, you can't go forwards. So that's actually quite a good model to think about. And then you've got your feelings, your emotions. And so we say, just become quiet. Just quiet. Just quiet. So settle down. And then they go into silence. And when they go into silence, they go into the depth, and they go into the deep, and they go into the stillness. And that is when the magic occurs. So they have all of these things. They've submitted, they surrender, they pause, they become quiet, and then they go into silence. And it's in that silence that all things can happen.
Beautiful. That's the supreme vibration.
Yeah, indeed.
So how do people find you and access this? We have about a minute left, so let's share that information.
Good. Yes. So it's Inner Dialogue. So it's one word, spelled the English way. So it's inner. I don't know how to spell that.
INNER.
And Dialogue.
Yep, Dialogue.
DIALOGUE .org.
.org.
So there's a website up there, and we've got students who are going to be starting. We've got teachers who are going to be teaching at the beginning of a series of courses of this particular work, and then I come at the end of all of that for about 12 days and teach them the whole of the work. So we're doing it incrementally, and it should be great. So it's in Oregon, one set of teachers, and the other side of the globe next to you, there's another set of teachers in Florida, and also actually in Austria and in Russia.
A lot of great places to visit. Keep me on your list.
Yes.
And hopefully there are listeners out there which are excited as I am about this all being part of our next phase of evolution and healing and growth. And I thank you, Mr. Solihin Thom, for your time today. And
My pleasure.
This has been another Maximum Health Quality Living. And if you've missed any portion of the show, it's available on all podcasts. And we thank NPR WQCS for being our radio presence. And we thank our helper assistant, Vel, for helping us to be on the air, VELL, velhealth.com. Download your Vel Health today for a wonderful way to integrate with your own health and well-being. It's got meditations and binaural beats and recipes and all sorts of wonderful guidance and tracking options for you. Vel Health. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thom.
I thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Likewise.